Ladies, let me tell you a truth that took me years to learn. There was a time when I thought silence was power, that if I just stayed quiet long enough, he would come back. He would suddenly realize what I lost if I disappeared from his life. I told myself, he'll miss me when I'm gone. He'll regret it when he can't hear from me anymore. And so, I waited. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. I counted every moment of absence, expecting it to create some kind of magic, some shift in his heart that would make him run back to me. But here's what happened. He didn't miss me. Not in the way I wanted. He missed control. He missed knowing that I was still there, waiting. He missed the option of me. But he didn't miss me. And worst of all, I started to forget myself. Because silence, when used as a weapon instead of a choice, doesn't make someone miss you. It makes you disappear from your own life. It keeps you stuck in limbo, holding on to a version of yourself frozen in time, waiting for a moment of validation that may never come. So today, let's talk about why silence isn't power, and what true strength really looks like. Let's talk about why you need to stop waiting, stop disappearing, and start reclaiming yourself. And if you've ever used silence as a way to hold on to someone, I want you to share your story in the comments, because you're not alone. But it's time to set yourself free. 1. Silence is not a tactic. I used to believe silence was my secret weapon. That if I just pulled away, if I stopped reaching out, he would notice. If I disappeared, he would feel my absence so deeply that he would regret everything and come running back. So I waited. I stayed quiet. I counted the days. At first, it felt like control, like I was the one holding the power. But the truth, I wasn't in control at all. I was just playing a role in a script he didn't even bother reading. Because if you're still waiting for them to realize your worth, you haven't actually left. You're still there, lingering in the background, hoping, analyzing, searching for a sign that they regret losing you. But that's not power. That's waiting. And waiting is not liberation. It's self-imprisonment. We tell ourselves we're making a move. We think we're taking action. But in reality, we're just reacting, playing a predictable role in a cycle that was never designed for our benefit. You go silent, hoping they'll reach out, and they don't. You block them, thinking it'll make them regret everything. But deep down, you still check their profile, hoping for proof that they're suffering without you. And when they don't react the way you want, the silence that was supposed to be a statement starts to feel like punishment. Not for them, but for you. I've been there. I convinced myself that silence was the ultimate power move. I ignored the calls, avoided the texts, and made sure he knew I was gone. But inside, I wasn't gone at all. I was waiting, still emotionally attached, still hoping that at any moment he would crack and come crawling back. But here's the truth. Silence only works when you're truly gone. Not physically. Not just blocking them. Not just deleting their number. I mean mentally, emotionally, spiritually gone. The kind of silence that actually shakes someone isn't the silence of absence. It's the silence of indifference. Most women use silence as a weapon, as a tactic, as a way to get a reaction. They think that if I stop talking to him, he'll miss me. If I block him, he'll realize what he lost. If I disappear, he'll regret it. But this is where most of us get it wrong. Silence isn't about them at all. Real silence, the kind that makes a man feel your absence, isn't something you use against him. It's something you use for yourself. If you're still waiting for their response, still hoping they'll break, still checking their profile to see if they're watching yours, then your silence isn't real. Because real silence means you don't care if they react. Real silence means they could reach out tomorrow, next week, or next year, and you wouldn't even flinch. Real silence isn't a power play. It's peace. And the moment you embrace that, that's when they feel it. I once knew a woman who mastered this. She was in a toxic relationship, one of those situations where she kept giving chances, hoping he would change, believing that if she just loved him enough, he would finally be the man she needed him to be. Then one day he left. Not because he didn't love her, but because he knew he could. He knew she would wait, that she would sit there in silence, hoping he'd come back, that she'd never actually let go. And for a while, she did exactly that. She waited. But then something changed. She stopped making her silence about him. She stopped checking his status updates. She stopped waiting for his name to appear on her phone. She stopped needing closure. And the moment she did that, he felt it. Because for the first time, he wasn't just losing someone who was waiting in the background. He was losing someone who had moved on. Months later, he tried to reach out. He sent the classic, "Hey, how have you been?" text. The kind designed to reel her back in. But she didn't answer. Not out of anger. Not as a tactic. Not because she wanted to teach him a lesson. She didn't answer because by the time he remembered her, she had already become someone new. That's real silence. That's liberation. If they texted you right now, right this second, what would you feel? Would your heart race? Would you hesitate before replying? Would you craft the perfect message, debating whether to sound casual or indifferent? Or would you genuinely not care? That's how you know. If their name still has power over you, if their attention still affects your mood, if you're still hoping your silence is working, then you're not actually free. But when you reach the point where their words hold no weight, where their absence doesn't feel like a void but a gift, that's when silence stops being a tactic. That's when silence stops being a game. That's when silence becomes your freedom. 2. They don't miss you. They miss control. People don't miss you when you're gone. They miss the access they had to you. There was a time when I believed that if a man reached out after I walked away, it meant he still cared. If he sent a simple "hey" or liked my post, it was proof that he missed me. But over time I learned the truth. He didn't miss me. He missed the control. He missed knowing that I was still there, waiting. He missed the comfort of believing that no matter what, I was still an option. The next time someone reaches out to you, ask yourself this. Do they truly want you back? Or do they just want to confirm that they still have power over you? Because if someone genuinely values you, they won't risk losing you in the first place. The biggest mistake we make is assuming that just because someone checks in, they care. That just because they reappear, they want something real. But often, their return isn't about love, it's about control. And the easiest way to control someone is to make sure they never truly move on. A man who truly values you doesn't need to test your attachment. He doesn't disappear for weeks, then casually returns with a "thinking about you" text. He doesn't let you go, only to reel you back in when it's convenient. He doesn't risk your absence just to confirm that he can still have you when he wants. If someone really cherishes you, they won't put themselves in a position to lose you. So why do they come back? Because knowing you're still emotionally available feeds their ego. It gives them reassurance that even if they walk away, you won't. It's not love. It's not regret. It's the safety of knowing they still have a place in your life, no matter how much they've neglected you. I once had an ex who never cared when I was hurting, but the moment I stopped reacting, the moment I stopped answering his late-night calls or looking for closure, he panicked. Not because he realized he loved me, not because he regretted what he did, but because he lost his grip on my emotions. I remember a man who would disappear whenever things got tough, only to return when his life fell apart. His "I miss you" always came after a failed rebound, after loneliness set in, after he realized he had no one left to comfort him. And for the longest time, I mistook that for love. I thought, maybe he really does care. But now I know better. If he truly missed me, he wouldn't have risked losing me in the first place. So let me ask you, does he miss you, or does he miss what you provided? The comfort, the security, the reassurance that no matter how badly he treated you, you were still there? You can tell by their actions. If someone genuinely misses you, they come back with changed behavior. They take accountability. They don't breadcrumb you with small gestures just to keep you emotionally invested. They don't reappear just to test if you'll still answer. A man who truly values you won't let you become a question mark in his life. He won't risk losing you to realize your worth. If he does, then what he really valued was the control, not the connection. And here's the irony. When you keep giving them access, when you keep proving that you're still emotionally tied, you reinforce their belief that they never truly lost you, that no matter what happens, you're still within reach. They can come and go as they please because you'll always be there. That's why they test you. That's why they throw out a "hey" or a random like. Not because they're ready to commit, but because they want to know that they still can. And the moment you respond, You give them exactly what they need. Proof that you're still an option. But when you stop responding, when do you stop waiting? When they reach out and find silence. Not as a tactic, not as a game, but as an actual reflection of your indifference. That's when they feel it. That's when they realize that you're not just waiting in the background, ready to be picked up whenever they decide. So the next time he texts, before you get excited, before you convince yourself that this time is different, ask yourself this: is he reaching out because he truly sees your worth? Or is he just making sure he still has access to you? The strongest move you can make isn't silence that waits for a reaction. It's silence that no longer cares if one comes. That's not just power, that's freedom. 3. When you stop waiting, they truly lose you. You never lose by letting go. You only lose by holding on to something that no longer holds you. People only feel your absence when you stop looking back. As long as you're waiting, checking their social media, hoping for a message, analyzing their actions, you're still inside their world. And they know it. They can sense when you're still emotionally invested, still lingering in the background, still hoping they'll come to their senses. But the moment you stop waiting, the moment you no longer care whether they regret losing you, that's when they truly lose you. Waiting keeps you trapped. It keeps you emotionally tied to someone who has already moved on. You may not be speaking to them, but if you're still thinking about them, still hoping for a sign, still interpreting their silence as a message, you're not free. The harsh truth? They won't realize what they had until they know they can never have it again. A man will never apologize until the woman he once had no longer needs to hear it. Think about this. A woman breaks up with her boyfriend and decides to go no contact. She tells herself she's moving on, but every night she still checks his last scene, watches his Instagram stories, still wonders if he's thinking about her. Then one day he sends a vague message, "Hope you're doing well." She convinces herself it means something. That's proof he still cares. But in reality, it's nothing more than a breadcrumb, a way for him to test if she's still emotionally available. If she responds, he knows she's still there. If she doesn't, for the first time, he feels the weight of her absence. And that's the difference. The moment you stop waiting, you shift the dynamic. You take back your power. Because as long as you're waiting, they don't have to miss you. They don't have to wonder. They don't have to feel the emptiness of your absence. A man will only feel loss when you become someone he can no longer reach. When he realizes that the version of you he once knew no longer exists. That you're not just silent, you're gone. Gone in a way that no message, no apology, no grand gesture can undo. That's when the reality hits. That's when he truly feels the loss. But here's the key. You don't get to that place by pretending to move on. You get there by actually moving on. By building a life so full, so fulfilling, that their absence isn't something you need to fill. By becoming so completely immersed in your own growth, your own happiness, that the idea of them coming back is no longer a fantasy. It's irrelevant. When you stop waiting, you don't just get over them, you outgrow them. You become someone who no longer fits inside the life you once shared with them. Someone who no longer craves their validation. And that's when everything changes. Because the moment you stop making your absence about them, the moment you stop waiting for them to notice it, that's when they finally do. Imagine a woman who spent years hoping her ex would return. She held on to every memory, replayed every conversation, and convinced herself that if she just waited long enough, he'd come back. But one day, something inside her shifted. She stopped asking, "Why hasn't he reached out?" and started asking, "Why am I still waiting?" That's when she began to change. She started investing in herself, rediscovering the passions she had neglected, surrounding herself with people who valued her, and focusing on her goals instead of his absence. And before she knew it, she had built a life where he no longer existed. Not because she forced herself to forget him, but because she had grown into someone who no longer needed him. Months later, he reached out. The same man who had ignored her pain, who had taken her for granted, suddenly wanted to know how she was doing. But this time, she didn't feel the excitement. She didn't feel validation. She felt nothing. That's the kind of silence that shakes a man. Not the kind where you're still hoping. Not the kind where you're counting the days. but the kind where his presence or absence no longer makes a difference. If you're still waiting, you're still in his world. The moment you stop waiting, you take back your power. The moment you stop needing closure, you become untouchable. Because closure isn't something they give you. It's something you decide for yourself. So ask yourself, are you truly gone, or are you just waiting for them to notice? Because the day you stop waiting is the day you finally set yourself free. 4. Disappearing isn't about cutting contact. Have you ever truly left, or are you just pretending to be gone? You've blocked his number, deleted his photos, unfollowed him on every social platform, but late at night, you still find yourself scrolling through old messages. You still replay conversations in your head. You still wonder if at this very moment, he's thinking about you too. That's not leaving. That's just waiting in disguise. True disappearance isn't about removing someone from your contact list. It's about removing them from your mind, your heart, and your identity. It's about becoming so deeply rooted in your own growth that even if they were to reach out tomorrow, the version of you they once knew no longer exists. My friend spent years in a relationship that left her exhausted. She loved with all her heart, constantly sacrificing, and in the end, lost herself entirely. When it ended, she did what many of us do. She disappeared. She cut ties. She told herself she was done, but she didn't really leave. She kept checking for updates, wondering if he missed her, replaying every moment in her head. She had removed him from her life, but not from her mind. And then one day, something shifted. She stopped focusing on him and started focusing on herself. She picked up the book she had abandoned in the relationship, reconnecting with friends she had neglected, and poured her energy into fitness, self-care, and learning new skills. She wrote down everything she had sacrificed for love and committed to reclaiming it. And in that process, she didn't just heal, she transformed. Months later, he reached out. The same man who had drained her, neglected her, taken her for granted. But when he saw her again, he didn't recognize her. Not because she had changed physically, but because the version of her that had once waited for him no longer existed. She wasn't just absent from his life, she was untouchable. That's the power of true disappearance. It's not about playing mind games, waiting for them to chase you. It's about shifting your energy so profoundly that their presence or absence becomes irrelevant. So how do you do this? You start by reclaiming every piece of yourself that you lost. 1. Prioritize your physical strength. Exercise isn't just about looking better. It's about feeling stronger, reclaiming your power, and proving to yourself that you can push through pain. Even if it's just going for a run, lifting weights, or taking a new dance class, moving your body reminds you that you are alive, that you are here, and that your story isn't over. 2. Develop a new skill. There is nothing more powerful than learning something new. Take up painting, learn a new language, or try a course in something that excites you. When you build your mind, you build a future that doesn't include waiting for someone else to validate your worth. 3. Create a non-negotiable self-care routine. The woman you were in that relationship neglected herself. She sacrificed her needs, put herself last, and lost her glow. Now is the time to reclaim it. Make self-care a priority, whether it's skincare, meditation, journaling, or simply getting enough sleep. You don't just want to heal, you want to radiate. 4. Commit to a life that's bigger than them. Write down one thing you gave up for that relationship. Maybe it was a dream, a hobby, a part of yourself that you silenced to make them comfortable. Now, promise yourself you'll reclaim it. If you stop traveling because they didn't like it, book a trip. If you stop dressing the way you love, change that today. Because real transformation doesn't happen when you leave them. It happens when you find yourself again. Here's the truth. They don't recognize loss until they see change. A man won't truly realize what he has until he sees that you have become someone who no longer needs him. If you simply disappear but remain emotionally stuck, he will always believe he still has access to you. But when he reaches out and finds a woman he no longer understands, a woman who has evolved past the version of herself that once clung to him, that's when he truly feels the loss. So the question is, are you disappearing to make him notice? Or are you disappearing to make yourself proud? Because if you're still tracking his moves, still hoping for his attention, still measuring your progress based on his reaction, you haven't actually left. But the moment you stop checking, stop wondering, stop waiting, that's when you know you're gone for good. And that's when you become unstoppable. 5. Silence isn't about manipulation. Silence isn't a mind game. It isn't a tool to make someone miss you, and it isn't about leaving space in hopes that they'll come back. If your silence is a strategy, if it's designed to trigger regret, to make them realize what they lost, or to push them into chasing you, then you're not actually free. You're just waiting. And as long as you're waiting, you're still emotionally tied to them. Real silence isn't about them at all. It's about you. It's about stepping back, not to provoke a response, but to rediscover who you are without them. To create a world where your emotions are no longer controlled by whether or not they decide to reach out. Many women believe that silence will teach a man a lesson. If they suddenly stop responding, if they cut off all communication, he'll finally feel the loss. And maybe he will, for a moment. Maybe he'll notice your absence. Maybe he'll even reach out. But what happens after that? Because if your silence was a move in a game, then his response becomes the reward. And the cycle continues. The real question is, what if he never reaches out? Would you still feel empowered? Would you still feel whole? Or would you feel like you had lost? If silence is only powerful when it gets a reaction, then it was never real power to begin with. A woman once told herself she was using silence to move on. She deleted his number, removed their pictures, and avoided the places they used to go. But every time her phone buzzed, her heart jumped. Every time she saw his name pop up on social media, she felt a rush of emotions. And every night, she lay in bed wondering if he missed her, if he regretted leaving, if he was thinking about reaching out. She wasn't speaking to him, but he still owned space in her mind. And that's when she realized silence wasn't helping her heal. It was just a pause in the emotional chaos. She had blocked him physically, but not mentally. She was still playing the same game, just from a distance. So she made a choice. She stopped making silence about him and started making it about herself. Instead of waiting for his absence to make him regret, she used his absence to focus on who she was without him. She asked herself, what parts of me did I neglect in that relationship? What did I stop doing because I was too consumed with him? Where have I abandoned myself in ways I didn't even notice? She started journaling, not about him, but about herself. She wrote about her dreams, her passions, the things that lit her up before she met him. She reconnected with old hobbies, reached out to friends she had distanced herself from, and committed to a fitness routine that made her feel strong and alive. And slowly, something changed. She stopped waking up thinking about whether or not he'd text. She stopped analyzing his every move. She stopped wondering if she was winning the breakup. And the most surprising part? That's when he reached out. Because real silence, the kind that shakes a man, isn't just about disappearing. It's about transforming. When a woman truly moves on, when she stops checking, stops caring, stops waiting, that's when he feels it. Because it's not just her presence that's missing, it's the version of her that once depended on him. But by the time he noticed, she no longer cared. And that is the real power of silence. If you're using silence as a strategy, you're still attached. If you're counting the days, hoping he reaches out, and still tracking his online activity, you haven't actually left. Real silence means you don't care if he reaches out. Real silence means you're too busy building your own life to wonder about him. Real silence means the door isn't just closed, it's locked. A breakup isn't about punishing someone. It isn't about making them suffer in your absence. It's about protecting your energy. It's about creating space so that you can reclaim the parts of yourself that you lost. If you're still hoping they'll realize what they lost, still craving that validation, still shaping your actions around the idea of making them feel something, then you're not truly free. But when you reach a point where their absence doesn't shake you, where you no longer look for signs, where you feel at peace regardless of their choices, that's when you know you've reclaimed yourself. And that's the only silence that truly matters. 6. If you're still counting the days of silence, you're not truly free. The clock keeps ticking. Day 1 of no contact. Day 5. Day 30. A sense of accomplishment builds, but deep down something still feels unfinished. Every milestone becomes proof of self-control, a victory over impulse. But is it really freedom, or is it just another way to stay attached? Because the truth is, if you're counting, you're still waiting. If you're tracking how long it's been, you're still measuring progress by them. Silence isn't about holding your breath, hoping they'll finally notice. It's about breathing freely, regardless of whether they ever do. There's a difference between moving on and pretending to. Sometimes, what looks like progress is just another form of emotional captivity. Going no contact isn't about reaching a finish line where they magically regret everything and chase after you. It's about reaching a point where their regret, or lack of it, doesn't define their worth. Imagine this. A phone sits on a bedside table, face down, the screen lights up. A name appears, the heart pounds. Not because of love, but because of anticipation, because this moment was expected and predicted. After all, silence was supposed to make them wonder, to make them miss what they lost, and now the message has arrived. But here's the real question. Was the silence ever about healing, or was it just about getting to this moment? Because if every action is still centered around the hope of a reaction, then there is no real healing. If silence is only valuable when it gets a response, then it was never about self-growth. It was just another game. So what happens when the expected moment never comes? When days turn into months and the message never arrives? When they don't return, don't ask, don't acknowledge the loss? What then? That's where the real transformation begins. Because real healing doesn't come from proving a point to someone else. It comes from shifting the focus inward, from asking, what have I gained during this time, instead of how long has it been? Some spend weeks, months, even years trapped in this illusion, thinking they've moved on simply because they haven't spoken. But silence alone doesn't set anyone free. Growth does. So instead of celebrating another day without contact, celebrate the things that actually matter. Celebrate waking up and realizing their presence no longer dictates your mood. Celebrate the moment you stop replaying old conversations. Stop checking who they're with. Stop waiting for the day they'll finally regret it all. Celebrate yourself, not the absence of someone else. Healing is not a timeline. It's not measured in days of silence or weeks of restraint. It's measured in how much your life has expanded since they left, how much stronger you've become, how many things you've built for yourself, not in spite of them, but entirely independent of them. If there's still a part of you keeping score, still a voice inside whispering, maybe soon, maybe next week, maybe they're finally realizing, then the silence hasn't worked. Because true freedom is when you no longer count the days at all. It's when you no longer check, no longer wonder, no longer wait. And when you reach that place, that's when you know you're truly free. 7. A strong woman doesn't leave a gap. Some people leave, and you barely notice. Others, they stay with you forever. Not because they begged to be remembered, but because they lived in a way that made forgetting them impossible. That's the difference between a woman who simply disappears and a woman who transforms. Many believe that pulling away, going silent, or vanishing from someone's life is enough to create an impact. But true impact isn't about making someone feel your absence. It's about making them see what they lost when they no longer have access to you. Because here's the truth. People don't regret losing those who disappear quietly. They regret losing the ones who grew so much that they became untouchable. Think about it. No one ever says, I regret losing her because she ignored me. No, what they regret is watching her rise, seeing her glow, realizing too late that she wasn't just another option. She was a once-in-a-lifetime presence. A strong woman doesn't just leave an empty space. She leaves a standard so high that no one else can replace her. Some believe that making an ex regret losing them is the ultimate goal. That if they just go silent long enough, if they just show how unbothered they are, he'll finally come crawling back. But the most powerful women don't waste energy on proving a point. They don't seek revenge, they seek evolution. Because the true mark of a woman's strength isn't how long she stays silent, it's how much she grows in the silence. When she walks away, she doesn't sit around waiting for validation. She builds a life so rich, so full, that she becomes undeniable. Her success isn't designed to make anyone jealous, it's a byproduct of finally prioritizing herself. And that's what truly haunts the ones who underestimated her. Not that she left, but that she became someone they could never reach again. Some people exit quietly, hoping to be missed, but what they don't realize is that time alone doesn't make someone valuable. Growth does. A woman who leaves a mark isn't the one who disappears, she's the one who transforms. She doesn't just remove herself from someone's life, she reinvents herself. She steps into her full power, chases her goals unapologetically, and creates a life that doesn't need external validation. And one day, the ones who thought she was replaceable realized that she wasn't. Not because she begged for their attention, but because she became so much more than they ever imagined. People don't regret losing someone because of silence alone. They regret it when they see that person thriving. They regret it when they realize that while they stayed the same, she evolved. They regret it when they understand that they never truly saw her worth, until she became someone they could never have again. Regret doesn't come from missing your presence. It comes from knowing they had something rare and didn't appreciate it. It comes from watching you become the kind of woman who doesn't look back. The kind of woman who doesn't check for their messages. The kind of woman who no longer needs their approval, and that is what truly makes them feel the loss. Not that you left, but when they finally realized your value, you had already moved on. A strong woman never waits for someone to see what they lost. She doesn't pause her life hoping for closure. She doesn't live in a way that seeks validation. She builds. She evolves. She steps into her purpose fully, leaving no room for the past to pull her back. And by the time the ones who let her go finally look up, she's already too far ahead. That is what makes a woman unforgettable, not silence, not distance, but becoming someone who leaves a mark so deep that no one else can ever take her place. 8. When you stop looking back, you'll see the path ahead. Every time you look back, you delay your own growth. Every time you wonder what could have been, you hold yourself hostage to a past that no longer serves you. Every time you wait for them to notice, to regret, to come back, you give them control over a future that was never meant to include them. Letting go isn't just about cutting someone off. It's about shifting your focus from what's behind you to what's ahead. Because the moment you stop looking back is the moment you start stepping into something greater than what you left behind. But here's the truth. Many don't move forward because they don't truly believe that what's ahead is better than what they lost. They romanticize the past, replay old memories, and convince themselves that the love they had was irreplaceable. They hold on because the idea of rebuilding seems exhausting, because the unknown feels scarier than the familiar pain. But the past isn't as perfect as you remember it. The pain wasn't just in the ending, it was there long before that. The relationship you're holding on to wasn't as fulfilling as you tell yourself it was. If it had been, it wouldn't have ended. What if, instead of waiting for someone else to return, you started returning to yourself? What if the love you've been craving from them is the love you actually need to give to yourself? Because here's something no one tells you. The relationship that will heal you isn't the one you lost. It's the one you build with yourself after they're gone. There's a reason why moving forward feels so difficult. It's because part of you is still holding on to the belief that the past is worth mourning. But growth requires loss. It requires shedding old versions of yourself, old expectations, and old hopes. It requires accepting that some doors were meant to close so better ones could open. And no, that doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean pretending it never mattered. It means deciding that your future matters more. Imagine this, you're driving but you keep staring in the rearview mirror. What happens? You miss the road in front of you. You miss the turns, the exits, the opportunities to go somewhere new. You risk crashing because you're too focused on what's behind you. Life works the same way. You can't move forward while looking backward. So how do you stop looking back? You start by getting real about why you're holding on. Ask yourself, am I missing them? Or am I missing the version of myself I was when I was with them? Sometimes it's not the person we long for, it's the security, the validation, the identity we had in the relationship. But here's the truth, you don't need them to feel whole again. You don't need them to give you closure. You don't need them to complete your story. You complete your own story. And that starts by shifting your energy, by stopping the habits that keep you stuck. Checking their social media, rereading old messages, replaying conversations, imagining different endings. None of those things serve you. None of those things bring them back. All they do is keep you in the past while life moves forward without you. Instead, redirect that energy, put it into yourself, into your growth, your goals, your happiness, into becoming a version of yourself that doesn't need to be missed because she is too busy thriving. Because one day, you're going to wake up and realize you don't even think about them anymore. Not because you forced yourself to forget, but because you became so focused on your own journey that looking back simply stopped making sense. And when that happens, when you finally see that your life is bigger than one heartbreak, that's when you'll know. You didn't just move on. You rose above. Growth is not found in waiting. Strength is not built in silence that hopes for a reaction. True freedom comes when you stop measuring your worth by who notices your absence and start defining it by the life you create in their absence. You are not here to be someone's lesson. You are here to evolve beyond the need to be remembered. Every moment spent looking back is a moment stolen from your future. Every time you wonder if they miss you, you delay your own healing. Let this be the moment you take back your power, not through silence, not through strategy, but through self-respect. Your transformation is not about making them regret it. It's about ensuring you never regret the time you wasted waiting. The life you build now, the choices you make, the strength you develop, these are what define you, not the people who fail to see your worth. So invest in yourself, rise beyond the past, walk forward without hesitation. And when you do, share your story. Let others see the strength it takes to choose yourself. Leave a comment below. What was your moment of realization? When did you finally stop waiting? Your experience may be the lesson someone else needs today.